Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Episode. Today we're going to continue the series on the MiSTer FPGA didnt Nano project, and you know it's been 48 hours since we talked about Nintendo 64, and that means the core must be in a completely different place by this point in time, and that 100% is in fact true. Robert FPGAZumSpass cannot seem to help himself updating this thing, and I love making the video, so we're going to take a look at it again. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But with the new core, there's a lot of graphical improvements and some new games working, and some of those games work because we now have flash RAM saving in the core. The Nintendo 64 had more than one methodology on how to save. We got SRAM a little bit ago, and now we have flash as well. But I'll get into the games that became alive because of that in just a little bit. But taking a look at the introductory sequence to Majora's Mask here, the last time we showed it to you, it was missing some graphical elements, and I believe the skybox was not there either. Now it looks exactly like it should outside of the dithering, and that's why you're seeing the color banding in the background. But I'll never forget this introductory sequence when I was a kid. Ocarina of Time was such a cheery, bright game until the very end game when you got to Ganon's castle. Majora's Mask starts right off the front with this terrifying moon ready to crash into Hyrule and end everything. It's a very dark toned game, but it's great to see it running on MiSTer, and I can't wait to do a replay of this. Last time I played through this game start to finish was on the 3DS. But when we saw this last time, there was no ground here whatsoever, and the skybox was completely missing. Now that is 100% working, you can save the game, and you can continue to progress outside of some freezing, which I'll explain in just a moment. If you are testing some of these Nintendo 64 games, you might notice that the sound stops working after a while, and that is because if the sound gets too far out of sync, it'll basically stop trying to play whatsoever, which can cause some issues. But here in Majora's Mask, you do get intro audio, and it does drop out maybe around the 3-4 minute mark, so you do get a chance to hear a little bit of it. It is distorted, so it's not going to be one of the sound samples for this video. But Deku Scrub Link here just running around this village, going inside. This looks spectacular, and I know just 2 weeks ago this game didn't work whatsoever. It used to be Creepypasta Link's face in the clouds. Now it is basically a fully playable game. Now nobody has finished this yet, and some people have encountered some freezing when they've tried to play the Ocarina. That might be down to the sound sync issue. People are talking about it right now on Discord. But you can get pretty far into the game, you can see everything that's going on, and you can see just how good it looks. And again, I know the dithering's not here, and some people don't love that look. I actually think the enhanced clarity of something like Majora's Mask as we see it now makes the game look sharper and to my eye better. But leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. I know everyone has a very strong opinion on what they like to see. I'm definitely on team less blur, less dither. But as we go further outside again, last time we were here, there was no ground whatsoever. Now all of the graphical elements are here, the heads-up display looks good, everything's where you would expect it to be, and that's so much fun to see. I still can't believe that it was just like 2 weeks ago that we couldn't even really play this game. Now it's getting to the point where people are talking about trying to see if they can beat it just for bug report purposes. As we get to the Great Fairy Fountain here as well, it's great that we have saving, because last time when we couldn't save in this game, you have to go through so many introductory sequences to actually get into the gameplay proper. Nintendo dragged out the intro for sure on this one. But now that you can save past certain areas, you can jump right back in versus having to watch all of this again just to try to get a little bit further in the game, which definitely takes more time. And a big thanks to Andy D for helping with the captures again this weekend. He's been an absolute asset. But you will see here, if we just go into the menu, all of the menu heads-up display is going to work as well. Everything's going to be where it should be. It all looks graphically correct. And if we were to save and exit the game right here and reload the ROM, it takes like 30 seconds or so because it's a big one. When we get back into the menu, you're going to see that our game file is still there. That's so important for these work in progress cores, for bug fixing, and then just for general enjoyment. If you want to go back and play a little more, see how it's doing, having that save file 100% makes a difference 100% of the time. That's just good math. Now another game that is working that didn't used to work before this weekend is 007 The World Is Not Enough. Now I know what you're thinking, no it's not GoldenEye, but it's still a fun game. And before you ask about GoldenEye, it's one of the games that uses the virtual memory addressing system that is not yet incorporated into the core. But my favorite part here is you can 100% blow the mission here. Andy D captured this one. He decided he wanted to electrocute the bank teller. Mission failed. We can move on. But this game has some really good music and it sounds perfect on the core as well. So go ahead and listen for 30 seconds. I'll be back with a lot more games.
I retrieved the money. No doubt Sir Robert will be pleased to see it again.
I didn't come just for the money. The report you sold King was stolen from an MI6 agent.
Don't
You really do forget how hard it was to aim on Nintendo 64 this generation of console and first-person shooter, but those bullets should 100% have hit him. The laser sight was over, and it did not work whatsoever. That's just part and parcel of playing games for this era. But I will say the sound is great and the graphics are great as well. This was always a pretty looking game on the Nintendo 64. Might not reach the level of something like GoldenEye or Perfect Dark, but it always looks good. If you ever wonder a way to go, getting electrocuted is not a fun time, especially when it's not done by a watch. But as we run into the elevator here, this game's always had some charm to it. It never lives up to the height of GoldenEye, but it is a fun alternative, and a lot of people have been asking whether or not it works in the comments. And if you do have another game that you want to see, leave me a comment down below and tell me, and I will definitely check it out in a future video. But of course, it wouldn't be a first-person shooter if there wasn't a bathroom, and it wouldn't be a first-person shooter if you couldn't open the bathroom doors. It's just very disappointing that there's no enemies in here. We can't end somebody while they have unfinished business, if you know what I mean. But again, it's just so incredible to see these things come alive. 3-4 days ago, you were not playing this game on the core. Pretty much every new core, unless it's something like a save function, doesn't bring many games alive, but sometimes we get a core that brings us a dozen or more, and that's what we were seeing here in 007. Just don't shoot the civilians or else you're going to have a bad time. Now, another game that's seen graphical improvements and has saving is going to be Animal Crossing on the Nintendo 64, and this is the English translation because Animal Crossing never came to North America until the GameCube, but it is here on the Nintendo 64 and it does have a fan translation, but this game uses a real-time clock, which I will get into in a little bit. But what that means is that there is a battery-backed clock within the cartridge that keeps track of the date and time, because if you've ever played Animal Crossing, you know the date and time are crucial to the components of the game as far as progress is concerned. When old Tom Nook here is glad we made it to town, it's one more person he can put in debt and make us pay off some bells, but all Tom Nook jokes aside, it's fun to revisit this game again, because last time there was definitely some graphical glitching, but now this just looks like Animal Crossing, how you remember it. If you ever played it on the Nintendo 64, there were some slight changes on the GameCube, obviously, especially with the heads-up display and controls. But onto that saving and real-time clock, if we go over here and talk to Gyroid, you can save your game. And what that does in any Animal Crossing game is saves your progress and also basically demarcates the time that you last played, so when you come back, maybe something like weeds have grown or the seasons have changed depending on how long it's been since you played the game. Once you get back into the game, your save is going to be there, but you're going to see KK and he's going to show up and he's going to tell you that there is an error. And don't forget, it's Animal Forest in Japan. I'm going to keep saying Animal Crossing because that's what I know. But he's going to pop up and say that there's an issue with your internal clock. And these things could die on the cartridge, and that means it can't figure out what date and time it is. But if you do have a save, you can set the time when you restart the game, which will basically do all that math in the background. Not quite sure what's going to happen with the real-time clock on the Nintendo 64, so few games use it. It really isn't a huge component, but it does make a difference here, and you're going to see Hambo is going to set the time for you that you already picked, and you're ready to get back into the game and continue playing where you left off. It's one of those things, it's a small hardware feature of the Nintendo 64, but it's crucially important to this game, and that's why it'll be interesting to see how it works in the future. But Animal Crossing also has a really unique and really fun soundtrack with some really strange voiceover for the characters. So go ahead and listen for 35 seconds because the sound quality is nice, but don't go anywhere because my second favorite game on Nintendo 64 is coming up. Sounds great to my ear, but leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think, as the soundtrack is so iconic. But if you want to start playing Animal Crossing on the current core, you 100% can. You can save your game, you just need to reset your clock every time you start again. Now moving on to my second favorite game on the Nintendo 64, it's funny because it never actually came out, and that is Cube of War. Now this came to the GameCube in North America and in Japan, but the Nintendo 64 version was finished and cancelled. But a few years ago the ROM did come out and I did a video on that, and people added in English to what was a Japanese release. We now have the ability to play Cube of War in its native format on the Nintendo 64 like we should have been able to play it back in the day. Now this game is just absolutely spectacular, not just from a gameplay perspective, but this really does hit the game as art conversation. I 100% think this is a masterpiece of set place, of design, of colorways, of charm. This has all the components to make a game feel so special that it feels more like a game and more like an interactive art experience. But that's me, and I'm prone to thinking these things. You tell me what you think down below. But the great part is we can now actually play the game, because the last time we tried it, without the flash RAM, it would not let you get in game because it realized there was no way to save the game, and some games prevent you from starting them if that is in fact the case. Cubivore was one of them, but now that we have this saving component added into the current core, we can play this game, and it's so fun. If you've never encountered it before, I'm not going to give any spoilers, and honestly the story isn't that deep. You play as a box that has to attack other boxes and eat pieces off of them to evolve to become the most dominant species in your box kingdom. It is basically just a cardboard animal simulator, but it is so incredibly engrossing. I love the design, I love the characters, I love all the modeling. Just running around as this VGE pig box in pink, it is charming and it makes me smile every single time I play the game, and I just recently replayed this on GameCube on my Steam Deck like 6 months ago. So if you've never checked this game out, check it out either on the current core or any other way you want to. It is absolutely an experience you will never forget. This is like Grim Fandango levels of gaming perfection to me, even though it's a completely different genre and not really story based. And if you notice that the screen is not centered, that's because there is some text above that does pop up. So this is just the look of Cubivore. But speaking of the look, we got to talk about the sound, because this has one of the best gaming soundtracks in history in my opinion. Go ahead and listen for 30 seconds and I'll be back with more games that just work. Just super charming, super relaxing. It does get a little bit more exciting later on as the game goes on as well, but like I said, if you've never played Cubivore, maybe now's the time to start on the current Nintendo 64 core. Now, a game a bunch of people asked about, and it did just become working as well, is F-Zero Climax. This is basically a fan recreation of the F-Zero game on the Game Boy Advance, except brought into the Nintendo 64 F-Zero engine. So you're basically playing Game Boy Advance tracks while racing in a Nintendo 64 game. And just like the original F-Zero ROM, this is just 100% working. Some of the tracks may not have the same level of visual intensity that you get on the Nintendo 64, but that's because they were all made on the Game Boy Advance. Obviously this has been pivoted over to have 3D elements in it, but some of the track layouts feel like they were more designed for a 2D system, which makes perfect sense, because that's exactly what they were designed for. And this is basically an entirely new F-Zero experience you can have on the current Nintendo 64 core, or if you have an EverDrive cart, your real Nintendo 64 hardware, because obviously this works on real hardware, and it basically takes F-Zero, turns it on its head, and recreates a new game whole cloth out of something that was inspired by the Game Boy Advance. There are a ton of good fan hacks and ROM mods on the Nintendo 64, and more are coming, and I'll definitely keep testing them. But if there's a sort of ROM hack or mod that you want to see on the video in the future, leave me a comment down below and tell me what that is. But it's so much fun to see all of these things working. You don't just get F-Zero, you don't just get the IQ version of F-Zero, you now get F-Zero Climax, which is just a whole new fun way to play, and it works absolutely incredibly on the current core. The controls are F-Zero, that means you're either going to be great at them or you may have a little bit of a problem. It does take some practice to get used to a game like this, but once you get into it, all the sound, all the visuals, everything is just 100% here, ready for you to enjoy it and play it. And isn't that great? That's the fun part about doing all these videos. 3 days ago, this game just didn't work. It's Monday. If you tried it on a Friday, nothing would have happened. But now, 72 hours later, you can just pick it up and start playing it and enjoying yourself. And that's the great part about the evolution of this core. We're not waiting a month to try new games. Sometimes we're not even waiting a day to try new games. Robert will give us a core in the evening, and then 8 hours later give us another one to test in the morning. It's been great to see, and again, this is just another game that's working. But on to fan requests. Everyone wanted to know what Quake 2 was doing. And I will say it's not doing much. You can see the Quake 2 logo here, you can see a little bit of a polygon matrix around it, and you can even get into the game, but basically within seconds, the first time anything happens, it's just going to freeze and nothing is going to work. But the original Quake is working, and it's such an interesting port with a good visual quality. But go ahead and listen to the audio. It's so strange and ephemeral, and unlike the PC version, I'll give you 30 seconds worth of an example and then come back because I still got a few games left to show you. I mean, it's definitely not the Nine Inch Nails Trent Reznor soundtrack we're used to, and calling it a soundtrack really is a misnomer. It's more of a soundscape with these ephemeral machine noises in the background, but that I think really works to the Nintendo 64's advantage because that kind of sounds what Quake the universe might sound like to me. Don't get me wrong, I do love the original soundtrack, but it is working here. So is the game, and it didn't used to. Now the thing about all of these examples is maybe level 3, maybe level 4, maybe level never, freezing can definitely happen. So just because you see it played here, if I don't tell you it's completable, that means no one's tried it yet, and I just don't know. Now moving on to a game that absolutely nobody asked for that exists is Waluigi's Taco Stand. I do not know what's going on with this game, but it is hilarious and it does work, and that's not true. A couple of you actually did ask about this game. Waluigi needs to collect taco ingredients to make tacos for different minions in Bowser's army. And because it's Waluigi and not a different character named Mario, you're going to have different controls. Moving around in this game is absolutely nonsensical. It is wild, but it's another one of those fan hacks that people know and seem to love, and here it's 100% working. It is fun to test these hacks out as well, because pretty much every console has a fan community that's developing things, and I love that if you stomp on a Goomba, pieces of meat are the collectibles. That is right, we are feeding Goomba meat tacos to other Goombas down below waiting to eat those tacos. So in the canon of this game, cannibalism is 100% fine so long as you add cheese to the mix. All jokes aside, that is actually what is going on, but leave me a comment down below and tell me if you'd eat a Goomba taco or not. The taco questions are coming fast and furious lately on the Nintendo 64 updates. But again, outside of all the jokes, it's fun to see these things work because they do work on original hardware, so if they work on the core, it is a good indication as to how it is progressing. Because everyone wants to know how Ocarina of Time is, how Super Mario 64 is, things like that. But it's these fringe edge case examples, when they're running, we really know that things are getting good, because sometimes these fan ROMs feel like they're held together with duct tapes and wood screw. That's not to knock this, it's hilarious and it's such a funny concept, but it's one of those things you can certainly see that the camera in this game 100% struggles with the design as far as the architecture is concerned. But you can 100% get Goomba bacon, and now I kind of wonder what a Goomba tastes like, but I will leave that thought to a different video. But for everyone that asked, this game works, and don't forget, if you've requested down below, there's a 99 out of 100% chance I am going to cover it at some point in time. I love doing all the requests, so keep making them and I'll keep hitting it up, but go have yourself a Goomba taco with cheese today. But the main takeaway I think on this core update outside of Cubivore is the fact that Majora's Mask has a lot more graphics, it has a lot more features, and it just more feels like the game we all know, love, and remember. And that is the current status of the core. For a lot of these games, you basically could play them and have it as a replacement for your Nintendo 64. Sure, anti-aliasing isn't here, dithering's not here, blur's not here, but it's recognizable as the game you know, love, and remember, and that's how we really need out of a core, to be able to look at and say, that seems like what I used to play. And we already have some of those games: Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, Cubivore, Super Mario 64, all just feel like different ways to play hardware in games that you may already own. And the best part is there's still features that have not been implemented yet that will bring us new games. GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, titles such as that, Paper Mario, still rely on a functionality of the hardware that's not been added to the core yet, so one day we're going to get another core that's probably going to give us another couple dozen games that just work. But that's the current status of the Nintendo 64 as of recording this. It is highly likely that Robert released another core that made a couple more games work that aren't in this video, but leave me a comment down below if you have any questions and leave me some requests. I will 100% talk about them in a future video. And don't forget to answer the biggest question of this week: what do you think a Goomba taco tastes like? I kind of think they taste like chicken. Short of that, we are done, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.